Okay, let's talk about an element that's been flying under the radar, but might just be a giant in the energy world: uranium. We're going to break down the investment case for it, why demand is suddenly surging, and what it all means, all based on the analysis in our source material. Right off the bat, I want to show you something that really puts this all into perspective. To get a certain amount of electricity, you could burn this entire massive pile of coal, or you could use this one tiny pellet of uranium. The energy density is just absolutely incredible, and that single idea is really the foundation for this whole story. So what is this stuff exactly? Well, simply put, uranium is the fuel that powers nuclear plants. You know, the ones that can generate enough electricity to light up whole cities. Okay, so that leads to the big question, right? Why are we talking about this now? Why is the demand for uranium suddenly on the rise? Well, the short answer is a huge global pushback towards nuclear power. And just to be clear, this isn't some futuristic, maybe one day kind of thing. Right now, as we speak, there are over 400 nuclear reactors already operating across the globe. That's a massive existing infrastructure that has a constant, hungry appetite for uranium. And that number? It's growing. More than 60 brand new reactors are under construction, with countries like China and India leading the charge. They're going all in on nuclear to meet their massive energy needs. So why the big comeback for nuclear? Look, renewables like solar and wind are fantastic, but they have a catch. They're what's called intermittent. They only work when the sun is out or the wind is blowing. Nuclear power? It provides reliable, 24/7 baseline power. It's the workhorse that keeps the grid stable, day and night, rain or shine. So all this rising demand is setting the stage for what is really the core of this whole investment thesis, a classic game of supply and demand. And right now, the scales are getting seriously out of balance. The numbers here tell the story pretty clearly. The world needs about 70,000 tons of uranium every year to fuel its reactors. The problem? We're only mining about 60,000 tons, so we are already in a deficit. We're using more than we're pulling out of the ground. And here's the kicker. That gap is only set to get wider. Projections show that demand could easily blow past 80,000 tons a year in the near future. That deficit is on track to become a chasm. Now, you might be thinking, well, why don't they just mine more? And that is the crucial bottleneck. Bringing a new uranium mine online is a painfully slow process. We're talking 8 to 12 years from the day they decide to build it to the day it actually starts producing. You can't just flip a switch and get more uranium. So, what happens when you have rapidly rising demand meeting a supply chain that can't speed up? The price has to react. And it has. Uranium has already rocketed from around $30 a pound to over $90. The market is definitely feeling the squeeze. Okay, so the market dynamics are pretty compelling, which leads to the next logical question. How could a person actually invest in this trend? Our source material lays out a few ways. The tricky thing is, you can't just go out and buy a bar of uranium like you can with gold. So how do you actually get exposure to its potential? Well, the most common way is through the financial markets. For most people, the simplest path is through something called an ETF, or exchange-traded fund. These are basically funds that own a whole basket of companies in the uranium industry, from the miners to the producers. A few of the big ones mentioned are the Global X Uranium ETF, the Sprott Uranium Miners ETF, and the VanEck Uranium and Nuclear ETF. All right, let's wrap this all up. What's the final takeaway here? It really comes down to what some people are calling a silent revolution in the energy sector. When you boil it all down, this whole story is really being fueled by three powerful long-term drivers: the global push for clean energy, the nonstop need for reliable power, and a market that is fundamentally short on supply. And this quote from the source material really just hits the nail on the head. Uranium isn't a loud trend, but it is quietly becoming the backbone of the energy future. And so that leaves us with one big question to think about. Based on this whole analysis, could uranium really be the energy future's silent giant? Now, we do have to include the standard disclaimer from our source. Any investment in the securities market has market risks, and you should always read all the related documents carefully before making a decision. Remember, this was just an explainer of the analysis, not any kind of financial advice. Thanks for tuning in.